All right, now back to today's jobs report. Joining us to discuss it is the former chief economist at the White House, Christina Romer. She is now a professor at UC Berkeley and a Bloomberg contributing editor, and we're always glad to get some time with her. Christy, thanks so much for joining us today. Let me ask first your reaction to this big round zero that we got on today's jobs report. Is it just a product of the perfect storm of the debt downgrade, European bank problems, volatility in the stock market, horrible confidence in August? Or is it a continuing trend of depressing, almost sort of recessionary problems in the labor market?
Well, I think it is continuing a trend. I mean, I think it is important to realize we've had pretty lousy job numbers for each of the last 3 months and arguably for most of the last couple of years. That, you know, we never really got up ahead of steam, and this really is a very terrible number. I'd also point out the data revisions. You know, we woke up this morning, and because of the revisions down in the previous 2 months, we actually have 58 fewer thousand jobs than we thought we had yesterday. So, you know, taking that with the zero job growth in August is a pretty bad number.
If you put yourself back in your former position as chief economist to the president, what would you advise him to do? Because obviously he's coming out with a speech next week. There was a lot of optimism for that speech at the beginning of the week, and it seems to has faded a little bit as we get towards the weekend.
Well, I certainly would be arguing very strongly to go bold next Thursday, to actually be taking an aggressive, coming out with an aggressive two-part plan that is more fiscal help for the economy in the short run and more deficit reduction over time. And I think I'd, after this report, be pushing even harder for even bolder, because I think that is what the American people need to hear. I think it's actually what leaders around the world need to hear. I think everybody is looking to the president for leadership. You know, so many countries are troubled as we are. What's the right way forward?
But Christina, some would say, where was this bold plan a year ago?
Well, I have to agree with them. I mean, certainly, if you go back to the last speech I gave when I was CEA chair back in September of 2010, part of what I was trying to lay the groundwork for, or certainly to help call for, was an aggressive jobs program then. And, you know, they certainly took some very important steps last December. But I do think they could have then, or we could have then, and certainly over the last year, there's been, I think, a real case for much more aggressive action. Of course, the president's in a very hard political position. He is facing so much opposition. You know, what I'm hoping for on Thursday is him to give his vision. Even if it can't get through Congress, he needs to try to convince the American people this is what would be right, this is what would work.
What do you think, Christy, about the mortgage refi plan that we saw detailed in the New York Times earlier this week? I mean, a lot of economists have come out and said it won't really put that much extra cash into consumers' pockets. On the other hand, I keep thinking about the guy who, you know, woke up, who has a 6%, 6.5% mortgage. He's paid it on time every month, but maybe he's underwater, or maybe he's just scraping by, and he just got so excited thinking, I could refinance at 4%. I mean, do the animal spirits trump the extra 40, 50, 80 billion dollars you get in consumer spending?
So, I mean, I think anything you could do on the housing front, I think, would be helpful. I think the main thing I'm a little nervous about, you know, doing sort of backdoor actions. I think it's probably better to work through Congress and say, you know, maybe the right way to get consumer spending up is, you know, certainly to extend that payroll tax cut that we had in December, is maybe a more aggressive jobs program. But certainly housing is a continued drain on the economy, and underwater homeowners are certainly not spending, as of course you would expect them not to.
Let me ask you, Christy, you were co-director at the NBER, the group that defines whether or not we're in a recession, and that's under a hot debate right now. What do you think? Are we in a recession? Do we enter a recession soon?
I think partly because of that role, I need to be very careful here. You know, my best guess is what's going to happen is we're going to continue to grow weakly, and that would not count as a technical recession. I think from the viewpoint of the American people and from the viewpoint of policy, anemic growth is very bad and something that we need to be fighting with every tool that we have. But and I think the other thing to say is, you know, as growth gets slower, when you're at zero job creation growth, the chance that you get a negative number number obviously goes up substantially. So there's no question that the risks of a recession have gone up, but my best guess going forward is we're going to have more sort of the same, which is very bad, which is anemic growth and very little job creation.
So then, Christina, what is going to actually have a bigger impact? Something that comes out from the Fed, where we're talking about a full-on QE3, or are we talking about something out of Washington that's going to have a bigger impact right now?
Well, of course, what we ought to do is both of them. I think realistically, the Fed is in a much better position to actually do something, right? So there's, I think, that's one of the wonders of them being an independent organization. They're free from political pressures and could take aggressive action. I think the chances, even if the president announces a bold job creation plan next Thursday, obviously the chances that it gets through Congress are not very large. So I would anticipate he'll also be talking about some smaller moves, some bipartisan moves. I think the main thing that could come out of the president giving a very clear vision is changing the political consensus and maybe getting more action probably a little further down the line.
All right, hey, Dr. Romer, thank you so much for joining us. Christina Romer, she's a professor at Berkeley. She was the chief economist for the president, and she is also a Bloomberg contributing editor.